Magua, Panyuai, Roshlam, stand and face Jerusalem. Blessing of the new moon. Barakate Yahweh, Basham, Yahweh Shai, Asherai, Nathan Nala, Achadash, Bashalawam, the water, Aman. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the new moon and peace. Thank you, so be it. Before I read everything. The Aliyah Ma'ad Shariah Machad, Psalms 121. Anya Rayam Mayam Ya Oh Hariam Mayan Yabawa I sorry Yabawa Mayahawa Shashad Shamayam Warataza La Yanathan Lamawat Ragalia Yala Yanawam Shashramarka Hanad La Yanawam Wala Yashan Shashramar Yashrale Yahweh Shemaryat Yahweh Tazalia Ayo Yad Yim Yad Yawamam Hashemash La Hakaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashamaria Makab Rai Yashamar Napashe Yahweh Yashamar Habalakya Wabawa Ayat My Fed wa Aid I Walam Basham Yahweh for what Aman.
Someone 121. I will lift up my eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help. My help comes from the Lord which made heaven and earth. Do not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall not slumber. Nor is thy keeper, nor is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and forevermore.
Amen. Shema Yasharallah, hero of Israel. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Allah Yahweh, Akad. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Allah Yahweh, Akad. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Allah Yahweh, Akad.
Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one Lord.
Amen. Tapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abiyanahu, Shabbat Shemayim, Chodash, Hayy, Shankat, Yahweh, Malak Wafkat, Thaba'at, Rotazawankat, Hayy, Aisha, Baratazad, Kad, Bashemayim, Nathan Lanawa, Lacham, Yawam, Zad, Wasalak Lanawa, Chabawat Nawa, Kasalach Nawa, Chabawat Yanawa, Wala'at, Abiyanawa, O Nasayawan, above Hawashinawa, Murai, Kaya, Laka, Hamalakwath, Wa Allah, Wa Thaparath, Wa Walam, Aman.
Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner, therefore, we eat. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.
Amen. I Sharamatazawa, 10 Commandments. La'ad, Yahayad, Lakad, Alahayim, Akarim, Alpinyat, La'ad, Daishad, Lakad, Pasod, Wala'ad, Thaibadam, La'ad, Thalakwaka, Shamwa, Yahweh, Alahayaka, Lashua, Zakar, Ath, Hayawam, Hashabath, La Kodashwa, Kabad, Abiyaka, Wa Amaka, La'ad, Taratazak, La'ad, Thana'at, La'ad, Thaganat, La'ad, Thainad, Shakur, La'ad, Thakhamad, Ko, Ashrad, La'aika, Aman.
Exodus 20 and 1. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy power, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. I shall have no other gods before me. I shall not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. I shall not bow neither to serpent or serpent. I, the Lord thy God, am the jealous, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children of the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and show mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. I shall not take the name of the Lord thy power in vain. For the Lord will not hold in guilt as thou takest his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day. Keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work. Thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy maidservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy captive, thy stranger that is within thy gates. On 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and honored it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's.
Amen. Shabbat, please be seated. Wakati Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai Asherah Fananawa Pari Agapen Thuadaman. La Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai Av Yasher Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the fruit of the vine, thank you, so be it to Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh Shai with Israel. Madwa, Panyuwa, Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Repeat the Hebrew only. Barakatah Yahweh, Hagadol, Rakawam, Abiyad, Wanawa'ad, Aliyawan, Malak, Shal, Shamayim, Warataza, Wakal, Dabarim, Hayayam, Wagam, Hamashayak, Mayahawa, Arawanawa, Ahabnawa, Hapalat, Yawaitaza, Yahawashai, Zakarnawa, Yahawa, Baratazawan, Ainka, Yasha'ala, Izarnawa, Banat, Wasap, Yasha'ala, Al Nanawa, Yam Yan, Aitad, Kayawamyam, Makodam, Babakushad, Shalak, Maika Allah, Watazawadak, Alahayam, La, Maganawa, Raparnawa, Washamar, Ionawa, Bakur, Shalak, Haruka, Shal, Yahawashai, Lanawa, Walamadnawa, Rabiam, Kakamed, Thabawana, Wada Shal, the Barka, Basham, Yahawashai, the Wada, Thum Yad, Waiwalam, Aman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, always and forever. So be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Natan Lanawa, Hathawarab. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us like the sea. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Natan Lanawa, Award, Lara Awaf. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Natan Lanawa, Quran, Hayo, La Korab, Ha'ain, Yeshabwa. Please be seated. Okay, so Shakadash Asherella. So Shakadash, everyone that's here in Philly, and I'll say also a Shakadash Shashia, which pretty much means sixth, meaning the sixth new moon, right? So that's the month that we're in. Shalom, everybody that's here with us in Philly. Shalom, everybody watching us on live stream. Shalom, everybody listening to us on teleconference. Welcome to Ha Yashar Kanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we talk about how the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples found throughout the Americas, make up the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel. And that we as a people has fallen to a lower state, politically, economically, religiously, because we broke the laws of God, found the Bible given to us by Moses, and they become out of the lower state that we've fallen to by turning back these commandments we broke by following Jesus the Christ. Or in the Hebrew, our original tongue, Yahushua HaMashiach. And one way we do that is by keeping the new moon holy. Right now we're keeping the new moon in this part of the world, right? Given the cycles of the moon. So from tonight sundown until Wednesday sundown, we'll be keeping the sixth new moon of the year. And we'll go into a couple verses to review the new moon. And as you guys probably see in the title of the video, I touch on some interesting things that I saw in a news show talking about the conflict between Iran and Israel, a little expose going into our enemy, the so-called Jews, a strong family out of the nation of Esau, right? Our chief enemy amongst all the other nations, right? But I shared the link as well as some of the details in the description. That I'll pull from some of those details as we get close towards the end of the new moon service. Like I said, we'll keep it brief but complete. But just some interesting things to consider, think about, and to look at when it comes to the lengths that the other nations will take to overthrow their enemy, right? And the lengths that they have and continue to take to overthrow our people as well, right? When we talk about waging warfare, remember, as you'll see in those details, all warfare isn't just swords, spears, and shields, guns and ammo and tanks, right? You have what they call soft war that goes along with hard war, which was the former. Soft war more so dealing with what they will refer to as, say, like a war of nerves, right? Or psychological warfare, different tactics to try to thwart your enemy mentally so that it makes it easier to overthrow them physically. So you'll see that Esau, all the different branches employ this, but you'll see when it comes to the so-called Jews, a particular family of Esau, that they spend time and resources to perfect these things, especially well, to wage against other Edomites, which they say they aren't, and to wage against our people, and to wage against the dark nations that are out there that are fighting with them and that are exposing them more and more as the frauds they are on many levels. We know we've been talking about this, those of us that have been called into the truth as prophets, to warn the people that they're not the real Jew, that we are, right? And anything that coming out of their office, coming out of what they have going on, is not going to be anything sound at all. So once again, we're keeping the Chadash, or the new moon. As you guys see in the bottom, an a sha, a ra, which just means happy, and then we have a cha, a da, and a sha, or chadash, and then a sha, and a ya, or shashia, which is how you say sixth, and then a ya, a sha, a ra, and a la, which is Yasha, Allah, or Israel. For folks watching on your phones, it's above my head, an a sha, and a ra, or a shar, a cha, a da, and a sha, or chadash, a sha, and a ya, or shashia, and then a ya, a sha, a ra, and a la, which is a shar, happy, chadash, moon, shashia, sixth, yasharala, Israel. Okay. And write down for your records, according to the Gregorian calendar, it would be August the 11th, 2026. And according to our calendar, as we're keeping the new moon, it would be the 6th month and the first day. Once again, the 6th month and the first day. So August 11th, 2026, 6th month, first day. So let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. And we'll get verse 14. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14, it reads, and God said, when you read this in the Hebrew, you'll see the word Elohim there, which means gods or powers, plural, but it's still a supreme, most high God that rules over all. That's why he's called the Lord of hosts. So we'll see singular God on many places, but you look in the Hebrew, you see the word Elohim, where you get the word Elohim from, which just means powers, referring to them as a group or as a collective. So it reads in verse 14, and power said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. This is the 4th day of creation. When you read the scriptures, it tells you that one day of the Lord is 1,000 years for us, and 1,000 years for us is as one day for him, right? So in this 4,000-year period, or the 4th day for the Lord, as far as from his vantage point, he discussed with his host to say, okay, look, this is what I want you guys to do. Make lights in the firmament of the heaven, which was already made, right, in the previous day, which is what we refer to now as, say, like the atmosphere, going up into the sky or the heavens. So make lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So use these things to distinguish between different times, right? It says in verse 15, let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so, as these lights do, right? Right now we're talking about the new moon, where at this point of the year, in the 6th new moon and other new moons, the moon, which is one example of a light, it's completely dark when you look in the sky. It won't begin to shine its light until about a couple days from now. You'll begin to see the light creep up on the right side of the moon, right? As far as how we observe it here in this part of the earth. It says in verse 16, and God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. So we're talking about the lesser light that rules the night, hence us keeping the new moon tonight. The greater light being the sun, right, which lights the day. It says he made the stars also, which you can see some of them during the day too, but you can especially see them on a clear night, especially if you're away from the city. You look up in the sky, you'll be able to see the stars also. So these were all made during this time period. It reads in verse 17, and power set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. So we can get light from them. Even as you go throughout this month and we see the light begin to increase in the moon, even on a clear night, you'll see that the moonlight can even allow you to see to a certain extent, even at nighttime when there's little to no cloud cover, right? We know when it comes to light that rules the day, that's the brighter light or the sunlight. And the sun and the moon both have their glory as far as what they do for us and for all of creation, not just us, but also the plants, animals, minerals, etc. Everything being put or created and being set up to carry out its purpose as appointed the Lord. It says, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And power saw that it was good. Because remember, light and darkness were defined already too in a previous day. and closes out by saying in verse 19, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So very important to consider when it comes to what was made on the fourth day. Now, for folks who may not be familiar with the new moon and may think, okay, what are these guys talking about? Sun, the moon, and the lights, and keeping the new moon. Like, why is this to be celebrated? What are you guys talking about? What are you guys dealing with? You guys dealing with worshiping the creature more than the creator, which Romans, the first chapter, forbids? No. What are we doing? We're talking about keeping the Most High's commandments and keeping them holy as it's written. That's why it says this. I'll get this in Numbers. Just to show how our ancestors, when we came out of Egypt, we kept the different laws, including this new moon law, along with other laws. But you go to Numbers chapter 10, where you read in this whole chapter, it talks about how we arrayed ourselves in the wilderness, how we use different means to communicate en masse when we needed to move from one place to another. And in this chapter, it talks about how we use trumpets to signal when we would go forward and when we would come back. We'll talk about this more. We'll revisit this in the next month, which we know will be a special new moon, the memorial blowing of trumpets. So in Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10, it says this. Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10. Also in the day of your gladness and in your solemn days and in the beginning of your months, which is what we're in right now, and we'll prove that in a little bit. Ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, which are different offerings that we would do routinely and for different special purposes. You read about those details in Leviticus 1 and Leviticus 3 in particular, right? That they may be to you for memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God, right? And we observe these times, but now as far as conducting these sacrifices with the priests, we'll talk about this when we get into the next Sabbath service going into the Old Testament. We'll read about King Hezekiah and how he reinstituted these things. We wouldn't do that now, though, because like it tells you in Hebrews chapter 9 and 10, right? Those two chapters go into how we look to Christ now as ultimate sacrifice. While we do observe these times on the calendar, as we were supposed to have a holy convocation like we're reading here, as far as doing specific offerings, we just can't do that because while we may know who the tribe of Levi is, as far as the sons of Aaron amongst the tribe of Levi, we can't pinpoint that since that was a special task for them to do. In Christ, what he tells us is when he came the first time, he came to be that ultimate sacrifice for sins, to where when it comes to sacrificial laws, we just wouldn't conduct them as Christ's body was offered up for us. And this shouldn't be anything strange because even within the law, it tells that what Christ really indeed is the last commandment to keep. But it was always written that when he would come, we would hearken unto him and be advised when it comes to what he would tell us to do now that he's here. But it says that they may be to you for memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God, right? So the Mossad is the Lord our God. He told us to do these things at these times. But notice the beginning of your months mentioned, right? Now, as far as the law to follow Christ as being part of the commandments, this was a commandment that we couldn't even keep during this time, but it was a commandment that we could keep when Christ made his first coming about 2,000 years ago. This is in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 18. Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 15, where it reads, Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 15, the Lord thy God, or Yahweh thy power, or in the Hebrew, Yahweh Elohayanawa, will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee of thy brethren like unto me, right? So Moses talking to our people, saying how the Most High in time will raise up a prophet from the midst of us of thy brethren. I mean, he would come out of our nation, out of one of our tribes, which we know later on would be Judah out of those tribes. Like unto me, unto him shall ye hearken. So Moses is saying, look, when this prophet comes, make sure you listen to him, right? It's not just any old prophet when you read the context, right? Because you have many prophets that will come. This is a particular prophet and more. 16, it says, according to all that thou desires of Yahweh thy power in Horeb, in a day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my power, neither let me see this great fire anymore, that I die not, right? Going back to Exodus, in like the 17th chapter, talks about that. When the people asked Moses to go in front of him, in front of the Lord, right? Lest they die going before him. So asking Moses to be our intercessor, to be our mediator, which Christ would take on this role and take it to the next level. It says in 17, and Yahweh said unto me, they have well spoken that which they have spoken. I will raise them up, a prophet from among their brethren, like unto me, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. See that? So the Most High is going to put his words in this prophet's mouth and will do all that the Most High commands, which Christ did. Christ didn't disobey the Most High once, right? And we know in the Gospels, Christ talks about that constantly. I seek not my own will, but the will of him that sent me, right? Blessed are the eyes of those that could see and that could hear and that could understand Christ when he came the first time, right? Because all of us didn't receive him. But a good number of us did. A good portion of us did. But that was verses 15 to 18 of Deuteronomy chapter 18, right? That law, which you go into the New Testament, you even see in certain Bibles, it will connect this verse with what you see in the beginning of the Gospels, where the disciples said, look, this is the one that Moses was talking about, Jesus of Nazareth, right? The son of Joseph. And they pointed back to this verse as a testimony to go, oh, this is the one that Moses was talking about. That was foresown or forespoken and then written that he would come. Now in 1 Samuel chapter 20, we jump forward in time to the time of kings now. And we've got King Saul and his court. And then we have David, who was part of his court, his armor bearer at this point. But we're going to read about them keeping the new moon too. But David not attending due to the situation at hand where Saul seeks after David's life. And he wants Jonathan to see for his own evidence that his father, who Saul was the king, his son Jonathan was very close with David. David wanted to see if his heart would be changed towards him to where it would be for good as opposed to for evil. So he's going to tell Jonathan, look, normally I would sit with you guys, but I can't because of your dad. I'm going to hide until the third day at even after the new moon and just give me the word whether or not the coast is clear or not. And had a certain symbolic gesture that he had set up to a young boy that he would do a certain thing. That would be like a communication between the two of them so that they would know whether David could come back into his father, the king's household or not, if it was safe or not. But in 1 Samuel 20 and 5, First Samuel chapter 20 and verse 5, it reads, and David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I might hide myself in the field until the third day at even. Right? So it doesn't say which new moon this is, but just lets you know that it was the day before that new moon. Right? Like I said before, you read the story above and below, it goes into why he's not enjoying the feast with them. Right? And when you jump down to verse 24, it reads, so David hid himself in the field. And when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat or food, right? So they would sit down and eat during the time of the new moon, right? It says in verse 25, and the king sat upon his seat as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. So the king, or King Saul, had a certain place where he sat. And Jonathan arose, so his son was there. Abner sat by Saul's side, and that was his captain of the host. It says, and David's place was empty. So you read the story, Jonathan knows why he's not there. But the king, he doesn't know. That's why he says this. In verse 26, nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought something hath befallen him. He is not clean, surely he is not clean. So in the law, it talks about the laws of cleanness and uncleanness, right? And how one's supposed to cleanse himself when they become unclean, right? Now, when we talk about being unclean, it's not like being dirty, right? Like you need to wash because you've been working in the field or you're sweaty and whatnot, right? Uncleanness is a condition of the flesh through following God's spiritual law, where you need to wash yourself and be away from any holy gathering until your days of uncleanness are fulfilled. Some are for either men and women. Some things are specific to men, some things are specific to women. Some uncleanness is only a day, some uncleanness is a week, depending on what caused the uncleanness. But when you read the law, it goes into those details. But now King Saul is thinking, all right, there must be a reason why he's not here. He's usually here, right? He must be unclean. That's why he's not coming, right? And his days need to be fulfilled, whether due to warfare or being with a woman or what have you. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. Verse 27, it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month. That shows us that the new moon is the beginning of the month. So in Numbers 10 and 10, it said the beginnings of your months. We can read this and see, okay, that's the new moon, right? It's not according to what we see now, where you think they change times and laws. We always like to read in Daniel 7. We've done that a couple new moons, where it talks about in these last times, I think they change times and laws, where we'll tell the time of the month differently. But in the scriptures, the moon was just told by the cycles of the moon. As far as when it was fully dark, that's when you knew it was the new moon, right? Not this January 1st, February 1st, March 1st, April 1st calendar they have set up that most of us go by here in the West, in the dominant Western countries. So while the sun told us the time of day we're in and the season given length of day, the moon is what we use to tell the time of month that we're in, right? So again, in verse 27, it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty, and Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meet neither yesterday nor today? Why have 2 days gone by and David's not here? He wants this question answered. But why don't you just read this to show how we keep the new moon and how it's the first day of the month and how it's a feast where we gather together. And in the famous psalm, as the brother played the song on off of YouTube, Psalms 81, where it focuses on the new moon, how we're supposed to keep the new moon holy. So we even made songs about doing God's righteousness, just like how a lot of our people write songs now, but to promote wickedness, right? Oftentimes ignorance, by being deceived by other nations, being tempted by other nations. They'll now take on the wickedness of other nations and then make wickedness their own by songs that they'll write and songs that they'll sing that promote all different types of wickedness, or poems that they write or lyrics that they write to promote sin and wickedness. Whereas the songs in the Bible are here to promote righteousness, to be sung and to be praised like we do with secular music or worldly music, but to uphold righteousness. Psalms 81. You always hear about you always see this conflict in, books, movie, and music about, our history and our current events. We have families fighting, right? Where you have the elder generation, they might be more church oriented. They say, okay, you're going to sing and you be a performer, do it for the Lord. The children become wayward sons and daughters and go off and, sing in, bars and clubs and, become musicians, but to sing more worldly topics because it's like, oh yeah, I sing about the worldly things. It'll be more profitable than me just singing about righteousness in the church. You see this story happen over and over again, right? We may have experienced this story and had this conflict with our parents where it should be a continuum where we're always singing about God's righteousness, but with understanding, not in ignorance, right? Which there's a verse for that too. I see your hand. Psalms 81 in verse 1. I'll stop at verse 4. And then you can pull what you're going to pull after I finish this. And I'll get a verse that talks about how we're supposed to sing praises, the right way to sing praises, and to perform music and things of that nature. Psalms 81:1, it reads, "Sing aloud unto power our strength, make a joyful noise unto the God or power of Jacob." So the Mossad is dealing with Jacob. You read other places, as we're going to read down, Jacob and Israel are the same. That's who we are. So he's our God. He made out everybody and everything, but he's dealing with Jacob. And Jacob, the people that came out of Jacob. Verse 2 reads, "Take a psalm and bring hither the timbrel, the pleasant harp with the psaltery." So different instruments. Here it's mentioning string instruments, but other instruments too, like percussion, things like that. Then it says in verse 3, then we got the brass instruments. "Blow up the trumpet in the new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast day," which we did with a type of trumpet, a ram's horn called a shawapar in the Hebrew. That's what we were doing earlier when we had the camera off, right? "Blow up the trumpet in a new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast day." Why? Verse 4. "For this was a statute for Israel and a law of the power of Jacob." So it was a law for us to sing these praises, right? And to celebrate during this time.
Oh yeah, like doing slavery, picking cotton or cutting sugar cane. A lot of our people were singing, spiritual songs, about Israel and everything, and then it started to go into the churches. But a lot of our singers back in the day came from the churches, came, singing spiritual song with the church, and it's like we just said, come on, oh, we can see worldly music and make more money instead of being in the church,
right?
Years ago, so, coming out of, come from the churches and sing our songs,
Come.
because it's more lucrative.
Right, because part of that prophecy Paul told Timothy, right? He said in the last days they'll have a form of godliness, right? But deny the power thereof. Because had the church really been dealing with the truth, it would have been a different scenario, right? As far as why folks would have left. But there was some idiosyncrasies when it came to the church and what the true message of God was, to where now we see that begin to happen with other forms of music that our people will come up with, right? Like you were touching on. But nothing wrong with these forms of music. It's all about what you're singing about and who you're singing for. That's why it says this in Psalms 47. Psalms 47 and verse 7. To go what we just read in Psalms 81. So Psalm chapter 47 and verse 7. It reads, "For power," I can actually read, if you go above, it says in verse 5, "God is gone up with a shout, the Lord or Yahweh with the sound of a trumpet." Verse 6, "Sing praises to God, sing praises unto our King, sing praises. For power is King of all the earth." Then this precept here, "Sing ye praises with understanding." See that? So we're supposed to sing praises with understanding. See? But for the majority of our people across the different tribes, we stopped doing this, right? We did it for a time, then we started to fall away. And then started singing for things that weren't the truth, right? Like we mentioned earlier, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. Singing for false Christ, singing for false religions, right? Singing for pursuits or endeavors that dealt with temptation, whether it be praising a false doctrine or singing to avoid affliction or causing affliction to others and then being proud about it, or singing songs about embracing the lusts of the flesh and not just the natural lusts either, right? Because nothing wrong with natural lust as long as it's lawfully dealt with, and yet even the unnatural lusts, along with the natural lusts that can be dealt with or used, but in sin, to get you and those you're doing it with to transgress. Now you have songs praising these things instead of the understanding of the scriptures. That's why it says this in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 9 in verse 10. Proverbs chapter 9 in verse 10, in case there's any confusion about understanding, what type of understanding we're talking about here. It reads, the fear of the Lord in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the holy is understanding. See that? So fear of the Lord being the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. So the knowledge of the holy. But now what's holy? Because many can claim to be holy. There's many gods out there that claim to be holy to serve, right? Whether it be worshiping things made by the Most High directly, like his host, or animals, or people, or things that we invent and say, yes, we use the Most High's resources and make these things, and now this is a God. And people sing to that. But now, what's holy? You can link with Proverbs 9 and 10, Romans. Romans chapter 7 and verse 12. Romans chapter 7 and verse 12 to go with Proverbs chapter 9 and verse 10. Romans chapter 7. What was that? I don't think I'm getting that echo. Whoever's on teleconference, just mute your line for me. Thank you. Romans chapter 7 and verse 12. Romans chapter 7, verse 12, it reads, wherefore the law is holy, and the commandment holy, and just and good. See that? So the law and the commandment are not only good and just, but also holy. So this is the understanding praises we should be singing. So Psalms 81 is a great example of that. It falls right in line with that. Since the new moon and keeping the new moon holy is part of that. Okay. Let's get this verse 2, like we always get, or like we tend to get a lot. In Isaiah, the second to last verse, just to show that the new moon isn't going anywhere. It's not something to retire as far as behavior. It's not something that's just passe. We don't deal with this anymore. Not true. Isaiah chapter 66, which is the last chapter of Isaiah. In verse 23. So Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 23. Isaiah 66 and 23, it reads, it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. So this is a prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled just yet. This is still something that has not come to pass, but this will be a future prophecy that will eventually come to pass when we get into the kingdom, which is the period after when Christ makes his second coming, since he already made his first coming, like we said before, about 2,000 years ago, right? So when Christ comes back, he's going to establish his kingdom on earth for those of us of Israel that are found worthy whether we be alive in that day or in the spirit world in that day. And then we establish the righteous kingdom on earth. The nation's going to learn, and the creation as a whole are going to learn to what? Keep the holy days of the Lord. Here it's just mentioning the Sabbath and the new moon, but it's talking about those, as many of the holy days are and can be kept by us knowing, okay, every seventh day is the Sabbath. Okay. When the new moon is fully dark, doesn't shine forth her light, it's the new moon. But it's going to be popular, like how American holidays are popular, even in far reaches of the earth, right? People know about America and her holidays, because she's the dominant empire in the earth. It's the same thing with other dominant empires when they had their time. People knew who they were, knew what they dealt with, what gods they celebrated, what language they spoke, right? But in the kingdom, the Most High's righteousness is going to be established. We're going to be the chief rulership in the earth. All the nations are going to come unto us. And like Christ said, bow the knee and confess with the tongue. So once again, show this to show that there will come a time when everyone will know about keeping the new moon, keeping it holy, and how it's a day to be separated or a day to be set apart from other days. Let's get this in the Apocrypha real quick, just to show that we're supposed to distinguish one day from another, the new moon and the Sabbath from other days, right? We may have sung those in the world, those psalms that talk about how this is the day the Lord has made, right? He's made every day, but the Most High made days different, right? Certain days had more importance than others based on things that happened on those days, or when the Most High instructed to say, set this day apart because I hallowed this day. I did. And I want you to keep this day hallowed or holy unto me. Ecclesiasticus chapter 33. Ecclesiasticus chapter 33. Ecclesiasticus chapter 33 and verse 7, which reads, Ecclesiasticus 33 and 7, why doth one day excel another, when is all the light of every day in the years of the sun, right? Like we read about in the beginning, Genesis chapter 1. One light to rule the day, another one to rule the night, right? Day in, day out. Why are days different? Why should it matter? Verse 8 answers, by the knowledge of the Lord they were distinguished, and he altered, which just means changed, seasons and feasts. Remember, and back in Genesis chapter 1 on the fourth day, right? The Most High said, let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. So those that wrote Ecclesiasticus are just hearkening back unto that, right? To affirm that days were set apart by the knowledge of the Lord. That's why it says in verse 9, some of them have he made high days and hallowed them, meaning made holy, like the new moon, like the Sabbath. Then it says, and some of them hath he made ordinary days, right? Because in the law, in the Ten Commandments, when it talks about the Sabbath, it says, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, right? And how the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In that day, thou shalt not do any work. Those would be like your ordinary days, unless one of those days happens to be a new moon or one of the feast days, right? Or a fast day, like Day of Atonement, for example. So Most High distinguish between the different days, okay? So that's in Ecclesiasticus 33:7. I read down to 9. And then as far as the new moon and the other host of heaven, in Ecclesiasticus 43, when we read from verses 6 to 8, it talks about the moon. Above that, it talks about the sun. and the glory of it. But in Ecclesiasticus 43, 6 to 8, we talk about the importance of the moon. So Ecclesiasticus 43 and 6, it reads, He is the Most High, made the moon also to do what? Serve in her season, the her is talking about the moon, for a declaration of times, to tell us when to do and when not to do, when to say and not to say. And a sign of the world. So a sign of the world, meaning those in the world can look and see the moon or operate based on the moon and the cycles of the moon. That's why it says in verse 7, from the moon is a sign of feast. So by keeping count of which number of month we're in, we can say, oh, okay, we're in this number of month, and this number of month, these holy days come, right? Some months don't have holy days within them, other months do, right? Besides the new moon itself and the Sabbath that comes every 7 days. It says in verse 7, from the moon is a sign of feast, a light that decreases in her perfection. So the moon goes through her phases. From the middle of the month towards the end, the light decreases, meaning it wanes. So from the middle of the month to the end is when the light decreases in her perfection, because the Most High made everything perfect, right? When it comes to his creation, we are that difference as far as mankind, where we have a choice to either walk or strive to walk in God's perfectness, or we can choose to do otherwise, and then now we have fault in us. But the rest of the creation follows the Most High. It follows the Most High's righteous pattern that he gave it, his instruction that he gave it. So it says, decreasing wonderfully, a light that decreaseth at her perfection. The month is called after her name. So when we say the month or the moon that we're in, it's like you're saying the same thing. Increasing wonderfully in her changing, right? So right now we're going to deal with the moon's increase. Right now it's fully dark, so we don't have any moonlight. But after a day or two, we look in the sky and we'll begin to see in this part of the world, light begin to shine from the right side of the moon as it begins to wane. As it begins to now wax. Because from this time until the middle of the month, the moon waxes, and from the middle of the month to the end, it wanes. And an easy way to kind of keep track of how much time is going by is just go by the week, count a week or 7 days each after a new moon comes in. So this time next week, if you look up in the sky, you'll see the first half of the moon lit. You look up 2 weeks from now, will be another full moon, right, where the moon is fully lit. 3 weeks, we'll have what they call a last half, where the left half of the moon is lit. And then about 4 weeks, it won't be the same day. It'll probably be a day or two afterwards, right? I know tonight we're keeping the new moon on a Tuesday. More than likely, we'll keep the new moon or Wednesday or Thursday night, because the moon is on average 29 and a half days long, right? We know 4 exact weeks is 28 days. So there's always a day or two, sometimes 3. Within a moon's time frame, right? From one new moon to another. But 4 weeks from now, and a day or two after that, we'll have another new moon. We'll be in the next new moon, right? Like we mentioned before, will be the 7th new moon, or the memorial blowing of trumpets, right? That moon, or that new moon being set apart as the 7th month, has a lot of good righteous activities that happen in it, right? It says, increasing wonderfully in her changing, being an instrument of the armies above. And this armies, right, is talking about the Most High's hosts, which the Most High is more than one host, depending on which heaven you're talking about, right? So we're talking about the first heaven, which deals with rulership, whether it be our people or other nations, depending on who's in their heaven. You could say the people, the army, that's like the host, right? Well, the host when it comes to that nation, right? If they're a big nation, they have people that can fight for them, right? Then you get to the second heaven, which is the heaven or the sky, right? Going up into the atmosphere and going into space, right? They have a host too. That's the host this is talking about as far as the stars, right? You go into the third heaven where the Most High Christ and the angels dwell, whether it be on the right hand of God or the left. That's a host as well. So in the third heaven, you have a host too, which is referring to the Elohim we talked about earlier, right? Whether they be on the right hand of God or the left. Because remember, you have good angels, you also have evil angels. They weren't kicked out like Christian mythology teaches us. That's not scriptural, right? They all follow the commandment of the Most High, either for the good of man's choices or the evil of man's choices, right? And other things the Most High has going on. So those are your hosts on the different levels, depending on which heaven you're talking about. We talk about the sky or the atmosphere and space. This army is talking about the stars. That's why it says, being an instrument of the armies above, shining in the firmament of heaven. See that? You read on in verse 9 and 10, it says, the beauty of heaven, the glory of the stars, and ornament giving light in the highest place of the Lord. At the commandment of the Holy One, they will stand in their order and never faint in their watches. So always moving like clockwork, right? That's that perfection we're talking about, right? There won't ever be a morning, right, where we wake up and it's like, 5, 6 in the morning, whatever time of the year we're in, to determine when the sun rises. And then the Most High is just like, oh, I changed it. The sun's not coming up today. And it's like 9, 10 a.m. You're still looking at the sky. It's still dark. You've never had that, right? And if you did, it will be because the Most High intervened because of something very special. Like one time we read about in the scriptures, when the Most High fought for Israel during the time of Joshua, right? That would be the only exception, right? We can get that real quick before I do. Okay.
Oh, I was thinking like in Alaska or Norway, certain things, it's kind of different there,
Mm-hmm.
like way up in north.
Yeah. Khan. I remember Kahan was going into a couple new moons back where he was showing the cycles of the moon in different hemispheres and how the light starts from one side as opposed to the other, right? Like we see normally in this part of the earth, right? You probably noticed that as I've been going through the lesson tonight, I'll say, yeah, it starts in the right hand and goes towards the left in this part of the earth. I said it that way for a reason. It's now in Joshua chapter 10. This is what I was just referring to a second ago. This will be the only exception we read about that's written since the Most High created these heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars. In Joshua chapter 10, verse 12 down to 14. Joshua chapter 10 and verse 12. It reads, Joshua chapter 10, verse 12. Then spake Joshua to Yahweh in the day when Yahweh delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. So this is when we were fighting our wars against the different Canaanite nations, right? Joshua being our commander at this time. It says, and he said in the sight of Israel, sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. Right? So talking about where these heavenly bodies, right? These lights were positioned at that time in the sky, right? And what they were above, right? Gibeon being in one direction, Ajalon being in a different direction. So Joshua was calling upon the Lord to stop the sun and moon from moving according to their perfect watches, right? And there's a reason for it. It's because of the righteous work that we're doing here by executing judgment against the Canaanites, right? To take over this land that the Most High promised to our forefathers, right? But to prove us by war, to see if we would trust in him. It says in 13, and the sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down about a whole day, right? So he is an exception. But when you read the story, we see why the Most High made this exception on this day for what we were doing, right? And don't be taken back. And we talk about this when we read this verse when it says the book of Jasher. So you may say, "Oh, wait a minute, table of contents. I don't see this in the King James Bible, but there is a book of Jasher that's out there. Oh man, we're missing out. Where's this book of Jasher? We got to go find it, start reading it, right?" But now, when you read that book, we've done that. We'll go over that in the class too, because I know you guys have questions during the normal weekly class, which tonight would have normally been. And we've gone over it. Like brothers and sisters will come and say, "Well, what about this book of Enoch business? Is this something we should be reading?" I hear people talking about it. Or this book of Jubilees. Is this something we should be reading? Or the book of Jasher, right? Now, we see Jasher being mentioned here, right? So yeah, we're going to acknowledge the book of Jasher. The question we have is, when we read what's being called the book of Jasher and read the events in there and see those events not aligning with the scriptures, that's where we have to question it and go, well, hold on, the people, the places, the things, right? The times, they're not aligning with what we read in the 66 books. So if there is a book of Jasher that's out there, this can't be it. Or if this is it, there must be something wrong, because we can take these different books that are part of what we call the canonized scripture, from Genesis to Revelation, as well as the Apocrypha, and see that there's a harmony between them, right? There's a concordance between them when it comes to people, places, things, right? Things said and things done. Whereas these other books, we can pull up different examples, and it won't even take that long. You just start from the first chapter, start reading. You know, it won't be a chapter or two will go by where you'll find something where it's talking about something or somebody talking to this person. And it's just like, how can these people be contemporaries with each other when they were years apart? You begin to find these idiosyncrasies to when you'll realize, oh, okay, this is the Mossad looking out for us, to where it's not hard for him, even though we've been in captivity, to keep his word intact for us to find it and read it and attain salvation. No matter how far we've fallen, no matter how much power the heathen have, the Most High has allowed them to have over us, he's still shown us a way back to him. Even putting a spirit on them of ignorance, like it talks about in Thessalonians, right? That they should believe a lie, that they should be saved. And now the Most High has them preserving our word, but they think they're preserving it for themselves, when the word's not for them, the word's for us. So it's easy for the Most High to keep his word intact, no matter how far away we've fallen from the truth. So don't be taken aback by these other books or many of the other books that we might see here in the Bible, because we can go into those books and see, oh, they don't align. So wisdom would say, okay, while knowledge may seek these things out, wisdom would say, are they even needful to deal with? Do they align with the scriptures that we have? Which right here, we got the essentials of what we need to attain salvation through Christ. Hell, we can't even come to the fullness of what this is talking about. These finite books and pages. So what profit is there by going out and going after this book and that book? What more are you going to find there that you haven't already found right here, and even haven't even found the fullness of this at this point, right? That's where we say, wisdom would say, focus on the water in the glass, as opposed to the water that's not in the glass, right? Even Christ himself said in Revelations 2:25, hold fast that which thou hast till I come, right? So if you have questions about those things, like I said, we'll go through it, because you may not be able to accept what I just shared with you, even though I'm coming from the scriptures. But we can go through those examples. We can walk through it, right? Because for some, seeing is believing, right? Walking through it and then going through those other books and seeing, oh, wait a minute, how is Enoch meeting with Noah when they were hundreds of years apart? How is Terah still around when they're building the Tower of Babel, or other things we found in these other books where it doesn't sync up? But if we need to go through those examples, we definitely can, right? We say, like what Paul wrote to our people in Rome, let God be true, every man a liar, right? Let's go through it.
Right. When it comes to books of the past, there's nothing wrong with books being written, because books and records were kept to have the Bible today. So that's why we have the prophets. And then later on, we have Joshua and Samuel expounded on this book that we are using today. Right? Expounded on the what Moses were given by the Mossad, and then they expanded on that same covenant. So books and records were kept. Histories were written about wars and reigns of kings. That's why we have all the compilations of Chronicles and Book of Kings, First Kings, Second Kings. These are all records that were kept by our people. Like you were saying, if those records, if somebody come up with a record that don't coincide with the record that was kept by our people, because this is our book, then we can easily, debunk any discrepancy from, anybody else that come up with a book, or another nation that would come up with a book. Because these books were written by our people, the records were kept by our people to have what we have today is the Bible. Nothing wrong with books. Another nation may write a book. And talking about the Bible, talking about God's people, but it better make sure that it aligns with the records kept by our people regarding our nation, Israel. That the Mossad gives.
Yes, indeed. So the water for that. Colossians chapter 2 and verse 16 and 17. This goes along with we read earlier in Isaiah 66 verse 23. Colossians 2, 16 and 17. Where Paul's writing to our people that were in Colossae, where he tells them, and beware, because you might have some that might take this verse, try to reverse the meaning, to say, judge you in these things, meaning they shouldn't judge you in these things and that you shouldn't be keeping them. But really, it's the other way around. It's that you should be keeping these things, right? You should be observing these things. Like he writes, it says, let no man therefore judge you. Remember, judging is not condemnation. Judging is just asking about what's something that he's saying, what someone's doing. And saying, okay, is what they're saying or doing, is that according to righteousness or not? Right? The Mossad is the one who can condemn. All we can do is just observe ourselves and others and go, okay, is this what the Mossad said to say? Is this what the Mossad said to do in this situation? Right? Based on what you observe with your senses. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day or of the new moon that we're keeping tonight or of the Sabbath days, meaning what we should be observing, what the law has to say when it comes to keeping God's righteousness, right? When it comes to the commandments, the laws, the statutes, the different offerings, whether it be dietary law, ceremonial law, moral laws, civil laws, right? We should be keeping these as they apply to us, right? Because we had this discussion before. I know other camps have had these discussions with people where we talk about keeping the law and they go, oh my God, keeping the law, all the laws, 600 laws. And it's just like, there's a good portion of laws that we can't keep because we don't know where the tabernacle of the congregation is. It was buried in a certain mountain that Jeremiah was one of the last to see it. So there's over 200 laws just for that, right? Between 200 and 300 laws just for the tabernacle. So we definitely can't keep those. Or there's certain laws that only pertain to women as opposed to men. There's only laws that pertain to the heathen that don't pertain to us as Israelites, right? So you keep the laws that pertain to you, given, who you are, based on the law. So you should be observing these things. So you see the new moon in that list, right? And then verse 17 is where it parallels what Isaiah talked about. It says, which are a shadow of things to come. See that? So by you doing these things, you're ahead, where everyone else will be behind, right? When it comes to, the new moon, the Sabbath, what's this? What's that? Right? Because people in the world, they're not really thinking about that. They're not thinking about the Most High's Sabbath, the Most High's new moon, the Most High's holy days. They're celebrating the Western holidays here you find in America and the European countries, or the celebrations you find in the African continent or the Asian continent or in the Middle East, right? They're talking about their things, but not about what the Most High has set up according to righteousness. So this is going to be the new way. It's going to be dominant in the earth, but it's really an old way. It's the way it's been since the beginning, because the law goes back to Adam. As long as you had righteousness, you had wickedness. It's just right now we're in the times or the days of wickedness, where they dominate, right? When it comes to wicked practices and customs. But the time of righteous practices and customs is on its way. And the Most High is looking for a few good men and women of the nation of Israel that he can bring on board when it comes to building up the nation, right? The 1/3 that's been not just called, but chosen to be delivered in that time. It says, but the body is of Christ, right? So Christ being the head, and we make up the members. Just like you have a governing body, we're supposed to be that governing body that rules or reigns with Christ, right? Him being the one to lead the way. So yes, another example of keeping the new moon holy, right? That you'll even find in the New Testament. It shouldn't matter, because when you read Hebrews 10:7, which connects with Psalms 40:7, it reads that he comes in the volume of the book. But you might deal with somebody of our people or of another nation that might be saying something like, oh, well, that's only in the Old Testament, that new moon business. We got no business dealing with that anymore. That was all nailed on the cross with Christ, which we've gone to that topic more than once in the class, as far as that the law is not done away with. And we use this one here to show, yeah, when it comes to the holy days, among other things, we're still supposed to keep those, according to this verse right here. It's Paul to go through this over and over again, like every letter of the Bible? No, because it was already known. It was already stated. But he made mention of it because our folks that were in Colossae needed to be reminded. Some of our people today might need a similar reminder like they did when it came to that. So that's why he said it. That's why it's written. But yes, it's all throughout the scriptures, not just in the New Testament, right? Psalms 40:7 and Hebrews 10:7 tells us that Christ comes in the volume of the book, meaning from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, all the Revelations 22, and what is it, verse 20 or 21? I know the older text, the original Hebrew, the verses weren't really numbered like that. We number them now. But yeah, the last verse in Revelation is chapter 22. Yeah, verse 21. Yep. Including the books of the Apocrypha, many of those being parts of books that are in the 66 books anyway, like parts of Daniel, parts of Esther, etc. Okay, so hopefully this serves as a good review when it comes to the new moon and why we keep the new moon holy. You probably see in the title, I kind of had a play on words when it came to what Isaac told Esau, who was our brother through Rebekah, but a different nation. As was told to Rebekah, 2 nations are in that womb. But here's what he told our brother Esau, who's a different nation from us, right? Us being the 2 youngest nations in the earth, right? The last 2 nations that were born in the earth. Esau being the second to last nation, and our people being the youngest of all the nations. This is in Genesis, right? When it comes to the blessing that Esau was given. And we see amongst his different families, his different leaders, like his dukes, this including the so-called Jews, or the Jewish people, as we say, you not really a Jew, but you're trying to pertain or act like a Jew. And the history behind that, where even their own people are bringing it out as far as how they converted to Judaism, but they don't actually go back to 12 tribes, right? But now in Genesis chapter 27 and verse 39 and 40, where we have the judgment given to Esau after Jacob was given the blessing of the firstborn, which was destined, right? Because remember, it wasn't even because of Esau or Jacob and what they did, even though that would be the thing to justify the choice. But the Most High already knew even before they did anything. Tells us that in Romans chapter 9. The purpose of God according to election might stand, right? Because sometimes folks want to get into this and try to, be an armchair quarterback and try to judge the play. Whoa, that wasn't fair. That wasn't justified. That's kind of messed up. Why do you go in there and pretend to be his brother? But all these things were destined to happen the way that they would, to lead to the next set of events. In Genesis 27, 39, because Mossad, if you see that in the title, that's the name of the spy agency, one of Esau's spy agencies, but the one for their physically mandated government of Israel that wasn't appointed by God, but something they set up themselves. Wasn't set up by, I should say, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but was helped or assisted by the God of this world. Remember, God is the title. And God can be used to refer to the Most High God, Christ. It can be used to refer to good angels, evil angels, that title God, even to mankind, right? It can be used to refer to us. And you see that in the scriptures. And even Christ talks about that, right? In St. John chapter 10. But now the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he didn't say for them to become us. But it was prophesied that you would have those that would try to take on our nationality and masquerade as us, to cosplay, to pretend to be us. And there's a judgment waiting for them. But now in Genesis 27, 39, it reads, and Isaac his father, Esau's father, answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and the dew of heaven from above. So going into when it's time for Esau to reign, which we see since the 300s BC with Alexander initially. And then after the Greeks, the Romans, another family of Edomites take dominion. Then it will fall away for a little while, like it was prophesied in Revelation. But then they would come back. As the scriptures say, the deadly wound would be healed, which is what we've been dealing with since the time of the Renaissance up until now, right? The rise of Esau coming back into power, upholding those same Greco-Roman ideals when it comes to not just America here in the West, the whore, but also the beast that the whore rides on. Her supporting countries like Spain, England, France, Germany, right, et cetera, et cetera. We see them taking on those same Greco-Roman customs and embodying them when it comes to their style of government, their architecture, all different ways they carry themselves, right? And take note here, not only the fatness of the earth as far as them spreading out and having dominion over many things, as Daniel said, the beast that was of iron, talking about them too. But then it says, and of the dew of heaven from above, right? So talking about not just them ruling the lands, but then also them having rule over the air, or rule referred to as airspace. You'll see other prophets that go into this in more detail as far as them exalting themselves as the eagle throughout their different governments, and how they want to set their nest, and how they go about setting the nest among the stars, satellites and space stations and things like that. But yeah, Isaac spoke to this from the Most High years before these things would even transpire, right? It's going back to BC times. So once again, we can't emphasize enough. I kind of loosely reference Romans chapter 9, but it's very important where it says the children not doing any good, not having doing any good, done any good or evil, but the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth, right? So notice I ordered it before these things even come to pass. Esau's being told this years, over millennia before he would even take these things on and do what he's doing now. But now check out verse 40, because if you look at your description in the video, you'll see, and this is researchable, but I'll put a link also in the bottom of the video as well if you want to look. It's like a little over 11 minutes, but I kind of paraphrased and kind of summarized what they were talking about when it came to the so-called Jews and their spy agency called Mossad and all the things they've been involved with, right? We won't go through all the dirty things. But I thought it was an interesting video because it really summarized and kind of encapsulated the structure, the operations and administrations of the spy agency and how they go about waging war on the different nations. And they even reference certain things that happen in history in the modern era. You can look to and go, oh, okay, this is how they work. And then you'll see parallels if you research other spy agencies, like another family of Esau, the English, they had the MI6 and the MI5. You could also look at America, how they have the CIA as well, right? But you'll see how these different agencies, they'll have many things in common with each other. They may call them by different names, but as far as the methods, you'll see they'll emulate those methods in different ways from each other, between each other. But let me read verse 40 again. I read 39, here's 40. And by thy sword thou shalt live and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have a dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. See that? So this is the time that we're in now, the time that Esau has risen up to take power in his different families. And the so-called Jews, the so-called Jewish people, one of the families of Esau, we see that they have laid down a strong arm when it comes to the power and influence they have over other Edomite families and over the other dark nations, and of course, over us. Always having a hand when it comes to anything we got going on, whether it be things we do religiously, things we do when it comes to business, economics, things we do when it comes to politics. They've got their feelers reached all throughout the earth to try to control things, to try to control or have power over others on all levels of power. We're talking about the money that we use, the resources that we exchange, be it plants, animals, minerals, to the land that we own, that they want to own for themselves, as well as the waterways and the airspace, like we're talking about too. And of course, the people power, the power or the influence over people when it comes to, a society and the workforce of a society, and as well as the military of a society, those that would defend said country. They want to have total dominance over people. And this small country that they set up as Israel and as God's people, right, cast themselves as God's people. And now they've had this spy agency. They talk about, with that video I share with you guys, it talks about these 4 branches, right? I won't play the video, but I'll share the screen, and then I'll just share the screen where it pretty much shows what these branches are real quick. Give me 1 second here. I'll just share the screenshot with you guys. Hold on. Oops. Let's see here. Here, and then we'll go to history, and they have an introduction at the beginning of this video, but they have around 2 minutes and 53 seconds. They have a picture where it pretty much shows the 4 different branches that make up the spy agency. Now, other spy agencies, like I said, they might structure themselves a little differently, but you'll find that they have very similar functions or structures when it comes to spying and espionage, which you even find those things or elements of those things even when it came to us spying out the land, right? But let's talk about theirs. So I'm going to share this real quick. Let's see, share screen. Add it to the stage. Okay, there we go. So in the notes I put in the description of the video, I have little timestamps where they talk about these 4 different branches that they pretty much use to run their operations, right? I'll just kind of do a brief recap of what I saw in the video. Like I said, it's only 11 minutes long, but definitely check it out and just consider it when it comes to things you might hear about either domestically here in the U.S. or foreign when it comes to conflicts that happen overseas, where you may say to yourself, I know we're talking about this video is mainly focusing on what they did to surprise Iran, right? To destabilize them and how they use these different branches to gain intel and infiltrate the Iranian country to get certain attacks or pull off certain attacks. But in the end, we know that the Mossad prophesied about what Iran, what role they will play in this final battle, as far as not only them teaming up with Gog and Magog, like it tells in Ezekiel 38, but also about how the device will be against Babylon to destroy it. And we joke about it with our people, with our people that come to us at camp when they want to, stress out, or other nations that say, yeah, what can you do against them? You want to say, that they're the fake Jews, this, that, and the third. Look at the power and the influence that they have. And we're not denying that, but what we can also show is how it was prophesied they would take this power, but also how this power would be their undoing, and the means of which this undoing would happen, the figures that will be used to cause this undoing to happen. So you see on the screen here, you got this one called KATSA, right? Which is these are like phonetic ways of spelling Hebrew words, even though they'll kind of have it in somewhat of a Yiddish format. But you'll see the KATSA as one, this SAYANIM, right? Or they'll call it Saya for short, because anytime you have I at the end of a word, it just means yam, like plural. Like we say Alahayam, which means like the gods, plural. We'll go into what the Sayas are. Then you have this thing called the Keshet, which is number 3, and then finally the Kedan. And they work together and work, you could say, in sequence with each other. And in a short video, they kind of touch on a couple things that have happened in recent history, conflicts that the Israelis would have with other countries, where they utilize one of these 4 different branches to carry out their activity. Like I said, mainly focuses on these more recent attacks in Iran, how they were able to assemble a missile within the borders of Iran and them not knowing, and then them launching against key targets. But yeah, this number 1, right? When you watch the video, it says that this is an Israeli intelligence network that's not that large. They say it might only be between 30 and 50 officers. And what they do is they scout, they recruit, and they manage local informants inside target countries. Like I said, the subject here mainly being focused on Iran themselves, but this could be any country that they decide to operate in and wouldn't even know about it, which means we might have to consider, they got their guys. Not only does the United States have FBI doing their thing, spying on us and other nations, right? But now you would have foreign agencies like the Mossad spying on them, doing the same thing that they did or they're doing in Iran, right? But it says they'll use certain people like government bureaucrats, officers that work in the military that have access to certain logistics when it comes to warfare, nuclear technicians, right? Or they'll use border customs officials, right? Because you think about it, if you're dealing with someone who has power when it comes to border control or ports where things are exchanged, right? It's obviously going to be effective for them to try to get some of those folks on their side, right? To share information with them, or to go in there and to become these, I should say, go in there and to become these different roles, pretend to be a citizen of that country. And he mentioned this guy called Eli Cohen. When you watch this video, he was called the Israel's man in Syria, and he was operating under a Syrian name called Kamal Amin Thaabet. And he didn't get discovered until much later, and he became a hero for Israel, but obviously a turncoat, a sworn enemy of Syria once they realized that he was used to infiltrate and to move up within their ranks. But that's what that KATSA talks about, which starts around 2 minutes, 53 seconds of the video. Now, the SAYANIM one that was interesting, this number 2 here that you see, this one was interesting because if you look at the notes that I left, these were Jewish volunteers that weren't even Israeli, right? These are folks that would be working in a country, right, where I think it said they could be either people of that country or Israelis that may change to appear as though they're not Israeli, but they're, a native of that country. So they can, look different ways. Esau can look similar. It'd be hard to tell what particular, Duke they come out of. But they're all Dukes of Hazzard at the end of the day, right? So they can pose as real estate brokers, physicians, mechanics, car rental owners, bankers. They'll be set up in major cities across the world, right? And then what they'll do is, depending on whatever their role they play, they'll provide, say, like a safe house. They can pretty much have it where the information won't be tracked or won't be stored in that government's database when it comes to people functioning in real estate. Or if they need to use a car for a certain attack, they'll have them be set up as like a car rental place. And then they'll make sure the records don't get recorded or they'll get cleaned up by the time the authorities in that country they're trying to spy on realize what happened. Same thing with if they need to get medical attention. They might have somebody that works in the medical field that works at like a hospital or something like that, that they'll help their spies out with any medical treatment they may need in case they get discovered or get attacked or get caught up in a shootout or a knife out or however they fight with whoever discovers them. And it says how they're not paid by the Mossad directly, but they're used to kind of get a leg in when it comes to infrastructure wise to allow the spies what they're going to have, which is further down in the list, come into the country and start whatever attack they want to do, whether it be a person or a certain place that's like a key target, given how economically viable it is to that target country. But like I said in the notes, you'll see in the description, I kind of go into the different examples as far as how they might use them. So yeah, you might have run across these folks in your day-to-day activities, right? Doing business, going here to look for an apartment or to look to get a car for a trip or to get medical attention. You might have brushed past this person, not knowing that they're actually affiliated with the Mossad. They're there as like a sleeper, not as a spy themselves, but just working in that respective industry to provide logistical support for the spies once they decide to launch that attack. And like I said, this video is going to tell they did it with the Iranians slipping through the cracks underneath their radar. And it's funny how they're giving this media attention because, while they still have these 4 branches, being operated, that's going to be to their detriment to where now they have to figure out, okay, how do we use these same things or do another attack and then still have the element of surprise? Because now not only are Iran, but other countries that may be allied with Iran and even countries not going to be looking at these different things and go, is Mossad in my country? And is there something that they might want from me? And how do I spot these guys? How do I protect myself from such infiltration?
Even if you don't see Mossad agent in any country around the world, they are all in there to assets in those countries. For example, all the Masonic Lodge, all of them, all across the globe, they all connected somehow to Mossad. All of them. So that's why even if they're not there physically, just being part of the Masonic Lodge, you think you're holding secret, everything just get translated into the Mossad. So that's why sometimes even the news media, that's why sometimes you have all of the information that you see here is the same information you see in another country being channeled, and they say they all in sync saying the same exact thing. So it's all. I mean, the whole world is in Esau's hand through
Job 9:24. Khan. I'm glad you mentioned the Freemasons. These four we're at here in North America, but you take that and apply that to, if not them, other organizations. You'll see how they've got influence and connection with those other secret societies besides them, right? And we kind of done classes on this before, but you look at all the different major world religions, right? You'll see that they have a particular spy agency that, or I should say a secret society, a mystery religion that kind of controls that more outward religion. So like with the Protestant churches, you'll see Freemasons there. Or if the Catholic Church, you'll see the Jesuits there. You go to the different branches of Islam, whether it be Sunni or Shiite, you'll see the Sufis there. But there's a connection between those different those secret societies with, like we're talking about now, the Mossad, because these spy agencies and secret societies, they kind of go hand in hand. While they're separate, they kind of utilize each other, right? One kind of informs the other, and vice versa. Right. So that's what you see wherever you go, right? Where you got the Judaism above that, you've got the Kabbalists. Like I mentioned before, with the Catholics, you've got the Jesuits. With the Protestants, you've got the Freemasons. It's like pies of a pizza, and on the outside of the pizza, as far as the crust and those are like your different world religions. When you get to the middle, if you draw a circle in the middle of that pizza, like a target, if you're doing like a bow and arrow, you see all those different groups. They all work together, and they all pretty much tie together under spiritual Satan, right? They all pretty much take their marching orders from one central place, even though in the world they'll present themselves as different interests, different programs, different goals, but they're all being brought together to follow that same goal, because the earth is given to the hands of the wicked physically, and the God of this world runs their affairs spiritually, right? They're advised by them.
Right. I was saying that even you might see a Prince Hall with all, let's say, brothers in it.
Yeah.
With no Esau whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
You best believe one or group of our own people in there, they connected to Esau.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they maintain their control. While you think, yeah, it's all brothers in there, it's Prince Hall, blah blah blah. But they have someone in there on a high up that's connected to Esau, secret society, right? And that's who they call an asset. So they got the asset in there, and the asset is one of your people that sell out to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now you got the first two, but now this third one, this Keshet. This is now you start getting more into the implementation of the physical war now. Like the first two are more so like information gathering and infrastructure support. You get to the Keshet, this group here, as far as this particular spy agency, starting around 6 minutes and 47 seconds. They're the ones that pretty much deal with hardware and software manipulation, right? For different types of machinery, whether it be for energy, communication, transportation, right? It says that they deal with electronic surveillance, covert entry, physical hardware manipulation, and there's for folks that are kind of into the whole cybersecurity news and things of that nature, I put it in the notes, but if you look up this what they call a Stuxnet attack, STUX net, it's a computer worm that they pretty much created, and they said they worked alongside the U.S. according to this news article on First Post to build this this worm where they put it on a thumb drive, and then they were able to get one of their people to plug it into the thumb drive where they have the nuclear reactors or the nuclear centrifuges, and this worm pretty much threw off the rotation speed of the centrifuge, right? Kind of like having pistons in an engine that are kind of pumping too hard or too slow, right? To throw it off, and it caused it pretty much to destroy itself. And then the worm will also cause their display to give them false readings to say, oh yeah, the centrifuge is working fine, the temperature is fine, the cycles per second of the machine is fine, right? So they actually use this, and it says on a nuclear facility in a place in Iran called Natanz. You look at where they had their nuclear plant set up. And then they mentioned a couple other attacks they did, like back in 2024, setting up explosives in a bunch of walkie-talkies and phones to blow up in different parts of Lebanon where they had been spread out. And then finally, Kidon, this number 4, that's like your final line of defense, where you got your trained operatives, your trained operatives from the different parts of what they call the IDF, right? The Israeli Defense Force. So it's like the equivalent of like your special forces that you might have here in the U.S. or the UK or other parts of Europe, or even other dark nations have their special, forces that are able to do, more highly specialized attacks that are more targeted towards individuals, getting into certain places, right? Like a SWAT team that's got specialized training. That's where the Kidon goes in. But usually they'll bring them on the scene once the previous groups had done their part, as far as getting the proper intel, getting the proper support in place, and then the Kidon will get the last line of defense that'll go in the dark of night, or when folks are looking in a different direction, to go and carry out different exercises or different operations. Like I said, to take out someone or someplace or something, whoever they got in their crosshairs. And I think they made mention to in the video, retaliation to Palestinian militants that kidnapped certain of their people, but then they had this thing called Operation Wrath of God that's, I guess at this point, been declassified if you want to research it. But they pretty much sent them against these Palestinian militants during the Olympics back in 1972. And the prime minister at that time of Israel was this lady called Golda Meir. But like I said, if you watch the short video, they kind of give you like the overall picture. If you guys want to do a little bit more research, you can research into more of those things, just so that you can see, okay, here's things that they've done before. So it's something we can expect them to do again if they haven't done it already, that they might do it anywhere, that they might find themselves either here or abroad. Or, if resources are thin, they might tap the MI6 or tap the CIA to do their bidding for them, right? It's kind of weird with Esau. They work together, but then at the same time, it's like a pissing contest with Esau, to where they try to outdo one another. Even though you would think, okay, they're all working under the same government, but now Esau has infighting. Remember, we read the Maccabees. We see that all the time, right? Where the different branches of the Greek Empire, they couldn't get along. They're part of the same empire. You'll have them spy on each other, try to overthrow each other, try to defame one another. So these are the same people then that are doing the same things now. So whether it's within the country of Israel, whether it's within the country United States, or between these countries, or between them, or say Britain, or whatever other spy agency they might use, because the French, they have one, the Germans, they have one, right? But we know the more notable ones would be Mossad, CIA, and MI6. But even they don't get along. Even they might even have intel they use or misinformation, they use one another to try to get the upper hand or try to get the siege a certain advantage one over another when it comes to our people or other nations, that they set sight on us or our land or our resources to try to take it from us. But like I said, kind of just came across this video and doing some research, and I thought it was interesting, so I'll share with you guys and just share some notes I took, at least on this particular spy agency, because it's one of those things that I find people are surprised when you know about, especially folks that are visiting America or might be here on a visa or for a certain period of time, when they find, quote unquote, Americans that know about these agencies, right? That their knowledge doesn't just stop at what the, visible government's doing, because, we might argue back and forth over red team, blue team, donkeys versus elephants. But what our foreign intelligence does overseas, that's what the other nations that aren't here in America physically, that's what they see, right? So they're surprised when, American citizens, quote unquote, know about these things, have awareness of these things, right? Because usually they're not really a part of the discussion. But we see that changing more and more as these things get exposed, while their own people expose the illegal things they got going on. Like I said, whether it be this spy agency or that spy agency or other spy agencies or other dark nations now getting similar intelligence agencies that function in a similar way, right? But just had that awareness of it. But all praise be to the Most High in Christ by way of the Holy Spirit, to where we go in the scriptures and see, okay, here's how we truly defend ourselves. Here's how we operate day in and day out, even though we're behind enemy lines. We've got the best manual to go by, where we have Christ's example, we have the disciples, how they function. We have the parables of Christ that show like how to not only communicate the best way, but how to make decisions, how to discern spirits, to know who could be trusted, who can't be trusted, right? We've got all these different methods right here based on the principles in the scriptures that we can look back to and fall on and fall on as a key protection, a key thing to trust in. Because if we're trying to protect ourselves physically against these agencies and the militaries that they have access to, you're not going to stand a chance. But now, if you lean on the Most High and His commandments and His hosts, right, that operate in the third heaven that come down here, now you'll find that, okay, now you can defend yourself against it. Now you can actually have a fighting chance. But the Most High has it this way, to where for any of our people in other dark nations, you're going to try to go head to head with these guys on a physical level, it's not going to work. Even in fighting against each other, as far as the U.S. and her allies and the Russians and their allies, that fight culminates, you're going to have people pretty much either choosing one side or another. But for us that have been called into this truth, we'll see that neither side is going to be victorious in the end, right? While they're destroying themselves, Christ's going to come back, and then Christ's going to destroy both of them, right? It's going to be easy peasy, right? It's not going to be any sweat for him to do it and his host to do it. So we compel our brothers and sisters that haven't come into this truth to trust in the Lord, trust in Christ, trust in their host, because, you're not going to be able to defend yourself against these guys without the Most High. Any defense you think you can muster on your own with your own strength is just going to be a half measure. It's not going to be enough. You guys can write this right. I'll give you guys Genesis 27, 39 to 40. You guys can just write this down. I referenced this earlier. This is Jeremiah 51. Just as far as the how they're attacking Iran, and had to go about it a certain way, because Iran's going to be a tool the Most High uses against them, whether it be the Israeli or the British or the Americans or any of their other families trying to control the earth. And any attempt or continued attempts they make, like using their agencies like this, try to infiltrate Iran, all they're going to do is bring about that resistance even more, because it was written. It's in the prophecy. The more you try to thwart them, the more you're going to bring the prophecy to pass, as far as their device being against you to now destroy you. because yeah, you might hit them or caught them off guard, but they've got other resources, right, that they can still utilize, and other forces that they're teamed up with that you haven't gotten a handle on or control over just yet, even though you've got a lot of tools in your tool belt to use. So Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 11. I was referencing this earlier. It reads, Jeremiah 51 and 11. Make bright the arrows, gather the shields. Yahweh have raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, for his device is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of Yahweh, the vengeance of his temple. So this king of the Medes is talking about, when we look at that region today, that's where Iran is today, right? The Medo-Persian Empire, the Iran is where that currently sits. It's funny because Iran, they've only been going by that name, I think, since the 1930s, but it was called Persia before that. But those people, they know, they remember. And they're going to be retaliated, as we see already. And the more they try to thwart them through indirect means, because, they're not foolish enough to go head to head with them just yet. But you see them getting ramped up because the Most High's turning up. But now, like this prophecy says here, this is in Ezekiel 38. See, what Esau's two major powers, which are the U.S. and Russia, are doing is fighting through proxies, right? Kind of like bullies on a playground where they send their minions after each other to send one to fight after the other, all trying to avoid a big fight between the two big bullies themselves. Now they're going to try to stay that off as long as they can. But when the Mossad wants that to kick off, it's going to kick off. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. Ezekiel 38 in verse 1. It says, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog. Now, those are the original people that had Russia that came out of Japheth, but it's talking about the Russians today, as far as this prophecy. He says, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, which is talking about Moscow and Tabasco, the two chief cities in that region of Russia, especially Meshech, and prophesy against them, and say, thus saith the Lord God, I'm in verse 3 now, Ezekiel 38. Thus saith the Lord God, I am against thee, O God, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and will gather thee forth, right? So Mossad talking about them like a beast of burden, rearing in one direction, having to go another way, right? Because they might try to say, okay, we're going to go more commercial route, try to build up our business, try to build up our economics. Mossad said, okay, you can do that for a little while, but when I call you, I'm going to call you back to war. You're going to do it like you did when you were the Soviet Union. I'm going to bring you back. So that's what this is talking about. It says, all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, right? Because they have a really big stockpile armament. They actually outnumber the U.S. when it comes to nuclear warheads, right? Could probably go online, look at the latest numbers. I remember years ago in the National Geographic, they had the total numbers of nuclear warheads. Even back then, they said that Russia had 16,000 and the U.S. had 11,000. And everybody else was like low thousands and hundreds when it came to total, when it came to the nuclear arsenal. It says, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. But now check out this list here in verse 5. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. But look what it mentions first in that list. Persia. So showing that before it's all said and done, we know they're already an ally with Russia, but Russia and Iran are going to be, it might be like this right now, but they're going to be like this before it's all said and done. Once they see the U.S. and Israel working with them, the more and more they try to go up in Iran to try to overthrow it, because it's a fight for land, a fight for spaces, and a fight for resources. Remember, they want to control all levels of power, right? But now Esau fighting Esau, they're both proud. So expect that Gog Magog, talking about Esau over there in Asia, which we call Russia, that's the dominant country. They're not just gonna take the U.S. and her allies butting in and pushing back that border further and further, where they're getting pretty much right next to where Russia's at.
Right. So something you just mentioned, where Russia might think to settle and try to build its economy, but the Mossad they're gonna have them switch to become the warrior like what's the Soviet Union. If you can see, they just had the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, where Russia is displaying how his economy is growing. Businesses went there, and other prominent figures from other countries, right? So they think to settle and think it's about economic prosperity. Before you know it, now they're using Zelensky in Ukraine to get Russia to stay in a state of war, right? So they can keep his warlike tactic mentality going, as opposed to settle for economic prosperity. So that's Mossad's pretty much saying, nah, that's not what you're here for. You're here to do my bidding, and pretty much stood up against your brother Esau, right? To go to war, to bring about my kingdom. That's pretty much what's taking place. But it's interesting, but most people won't see it. They see it as just simply geopolitical conflict. Right. Yeah, the geopolitical conflict is pretty much is manipulated by the Mossad to bring about our kingdom.
Right.
But most of our people, they're not even connected to what's happening. Right. But it's for them.
Right. So now the conflicts we see in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia being one of the chief countries there, but even the other families of Ethiopia, the other families of Kush, like Djibouti and Somalia and places like that, they remember what the U.S. has done in that part of the world, just in general. And look at there, Libya, right? Don't forget the people of Libya didn't forget about what happened with Muammar Gaddafi and how the U.S. got him up out of there, right? So, is the enemy of the enemy my friend? For a lot of these other nations in this list, yeah, they're going to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go to these other Edomites over here in the East, because they gave me a slightly better deal than these ones in the West that came in and messed up my country and now got me living destitute. Can't even do trade anymore. So these guys are going to buddy up with the Russians too, so-called Russians. Persia, Ethiopian, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. And I like this verse 6, right? Because this is the one that really surprises folks. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, right? So now these are the original Japhetic people that were in Europe, but now Gomer today is France. Togarmah today is Germany. Now, how tough is that going to be when we talk about the 7 heads and the 10 horns, right? Out of the 7 heads that make up the European Union, right? And the European, the European Union. France and Germany are usually the ones everybody leans on. When any other countries are in trouble as far as like financial deficits or artificially manufactured immigration problems, right? They always lean towards Germany and France for the bailout. And don't think that France and Germany are going to get fed up, which they probably are already, where it's just like, yo, we're trying to keep our own country running. Now you want us to reach in our coffers and help you out, to where it's only going to be a matter of time before they get dissatisfied with this EU arrangement and say, yo, U.S., Great Britain, you guys can have it. We're going over here. We're siding with the Russians now. Right. So these things are coming. But most people would say, oh, that would never happen. But like we're talking about, unless you have eyes to see it and ears to hear it, and a hard to understand it, right? It's gonna catch you by surprise. But if you do, you'll see the writing on the wall. Because I'm sure when Daniel gave his prophecies in Babylon, they heard what he said. They said, "Oh, the Persians going to take us over." You know, mini tekel uparshin. They probably were probably amazed by that before it took place, and then when it happened, by the time it went down, it was too late. So when he gave the prophecy, and some of them were probably like, "What's he talking about?" It's going to be the same thing now, as the real prophets of the Lord out here are going to show them these prophecies and show our people these prophecies. They're going to come to pass. But like we said, those that have eyes to see it, ears to hear it, the heart to understand it, they'll know it, see it, and then be ready for what's to come afterwards. That's why it says, I'll read on in this verse, it says, and all his bands and many people with thee. Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Right? So the stage being set for the Third World War. And I'll get this other verse too, and then I'll close out. Those folks have other questions or comments. But this is Isaiah chapter 13, to go to Jeremiah 15:11, as well as Ezekiel 38. I read from 1 to 7, but the key verse was in verse 5. But this is Isaiah 13. Isaiah chapter 13. It says in verse 17, Isaiah chapter 13 and verse 17, this whole chapter is good to read because it's going against Babylon and what's going to come against them, as far as Babylon the Great, not the old Babylon. And Isaiah 13 and verse 17, it reads, "Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them." Once again, talking about what we now refer to as Iran. "Which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it." So it's not going to be like other countries. You can just come in and bribe them and be like, "Okay, name your price." Or let's see if we can tap their puppet leaders to get them to do our bidding, right? It's not going to be enough, right? Them getting the son of the Shah, right, and trying to set him up as a puppet leader over Iran, that's not going to be enough, right? Iran's got all different types of countermeasures that they've been preparing over the decades because of all the screwball stuff that the British have done to them and now the Americans have done to them. They learned, they've watched you, right? And they said, okay, time to respond in kind. It says in verse 18, "Their bows or their bows also shall dash the young men in pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children." Right? So the same way you come in hardcore, attacking civilians, right? And we know we have the Israelis. We can look at them. They're known for that, right? They'll say they're going to attack, the military of their enemy, but then they'll go after the women and children, the hospitals, like the schools, universities, right? They'll go after those areas. So don't be surprised when you get the response. You get the mirror shown to you. You get the same response of what you've been putting out. Yeah, that was Isaiah chapter 13. I just read 17 and 18 to go with those other verses as well. But yeah, just you can, like I said, cross-reference this with the other past new moons where we talked about. Like I remember before we did a new moon about we called the Devil's Playbook, about the afflictions of Job. We kind of paralleled it to what the CIA and other spy agencies do. You can pretty much match Mossad in that same matrix, because even though, like I said, they might have a slightly different structure, they're pretty much going to be doing the same thing. It's all about surprise. It's all about deception. It's all about, like I talk about I kind of just arranged it, but I call it the 6 offenses of Esau, where anywhere they go on the earth, whether it's the Israeli, the Americans, the British, wherever you go, you're going to have those 6, which are, we'll say, grape or EPAR, right? So they don't try to flag the video. Theft, and murder, right? Then you have deception, oppression, and profanity. So this being a part of that deception piece, right? As far as deceive when it comes to like the news media at that level, all the way down to getting people to deceive you that are in your country, don't belong, all the way down to whatever force you may employ in that country once the time comes to strike at a certain target, be it a person, a company, a region or an area that has a certain resource, whatever they're after. So different families of Esau, but in the same day, you see that they all have the same calling card. They all operate in a similar fashion. All right, so we'll make it end here unless anyone else has any other questions or comments, anything they want to bring out. But like I said, just check the description for those 4 groups that make up the Mossad spy agency, and you'll see the link in that in the description as well. I have timestamps where it talks about each of these different groups and how they're built, and how they function. And it was another video we were talking about during last Tuesday's class. We'll probably revisit that when we do the class again. Just kind of do some response and some reaction to it, and then tie it back to prophecy. But once again, we'll just say, as we always do, Barak Atah by Shem Shai, La Rokak Wadash, right? Because without them, it wouldn't be possible for us or other branches of Christ out there to wake up, to come back to this truth, start keeping the commandments while believing on Christ. And let me just read these 2 verses, and then we'll do the closing prayers, right? Talking about our little topic tonight, dealing with the operators and administrators of the enemy, because we know we have spiritual gifts as far as different operators, different administrations, but keep an eye out for the enemy, because they have those too. But instead of bringing life, theirs bring death, right? So as we organize in righteousness, we want to bring life to our people, while we see Esau and their different families bringing death, using their own version, their own corrupt version of operators and administrations through their spy agencies. But now this is Revelation chapter 3 in verse 9. Actually, I'll read 2 and 9, then I'll read 3 and 9. All right, we should all be familiar with these, right? Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9, it reads, I know that works, and tribulation, and poverty, but thou art rich, talking to God's actual people. Why? Because the kingdom is promised unto us. Even when we may be physically poor, we're spiritually rich because we have the commandments and the fruits of the Spirit, right, which are part of the tree of life. Whereas the other nations don't have that. It says, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, right? So we just showcased a part of that synagogue, exposing their spy agency and the structure they have there, and the different people they use to carry out their clandestine activities. Now, Revelations 3 and 9, it says, behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee, right? So let them do their thing, right? We can understand it, break it down, right? See the different things, so we can defend ourselves from it, right? Because scriptures tell us, well, that's my brother's favorite verse, and I think it's Isaiah 33 and 6, where it says, wisdom and knowledge be the stability of our times. So we've emphasized the Most High's wisdom, of course, godly wisdom, but then the knowledge of this world, we at least want to be aware of it so that we know, okay, these are different techniques and machinations that they're up to, so that we can expose it, thwart it, see it before it arrives, and rebuke it, right? So that it can't even come to its full fruition. So just remember, it's always going to be down here as far as its importance when it comes to the knowledge of wickedness, whereas the knowledge of righteousness is up here when it comes to importance. While it's good to be aware of what the wicked are doing, it's better to know what God's righteousness is and how that righteousness needs to be used and utilized through us. Reading on in verse 10, it says, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the earth, and try them that dwell upon the earth. Behold, I come quickly. Hold fast that which thou hast, we touched on earlier, that no man take thy crown. See that? So, let's not lose our crown. Let's take our crown and take hold of it, right? Let's make sure while we learn about the government and how things actually work on this earth, we also want to make sure we meditate on the righteous government by always observing and keeping the commandments and meditating on the scriptures, looking for new ways to exemplify and to implement God's word on the earth, right? That's our part to play in this script called reality in the times that we're in. Okay, so hopefully you guys found that informative and useful. If you guys may have read about that already, but I can't stress this enough, the importance of continuing to watch and pray as we get closer and closer to that day that Christ makes the second coming, right? Because most folks are just going to be looking at things from a carnal level and they're going to be blindsided. But for those that have the insight as far as spiritual insight, we may even not be able to see all physical things, but that spiritual insight is going to give us that big overall picture to where when we see physical things happening in the earth, we'll be able to place them as they come to pass because we have that deeper, more all-encompassing spiritual insight as far as the why behind what's going on and how it's happening. Okay. So Shar Kadash Shashe once again, or happy 6th new moon, Yashar Allah. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for hanging in there. Hopefully you were edified once again. And most of us will talk to everybody in the Friday class coming up. During the new moon, if you have to go to work tomorrow, just still try to stay in the spirit of the new moon the best you can and observe it the best you can if you are compelled to work and are able to take off. And we'll say Shalom wa laila tawa. With that, we'll do the closing prayers. Barakatha Yahweh by Shemi Shai, Asherah, Tananawa, Pari Hagapan, Thwada Aman. La Yahweh by Shemi Shai of Yasher Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Mavwa, Punyawa, Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawa, Aita, Yam Yam, Aita, Shalak, Ma'aka Allah, Wala Allahayim, Tazwadakim, La, Shamar Ayel, Barak, Rapah, Magan, Wat Chaziyak, Banya, Yasharella, Washalak, Lanawa, Rabian, Kakama, Rabian, Da'if, Rabian, Bayana, Rabian, Sabalonwath, Rabian, Amawan, Rabian, Aqua, Rabian, Ahabian, Rabian, Haganah, Rochanaya, Wasalat, Kau, Katsayanawa, La Akin, Wa Akiwa, Wayasha'ala, Thamyad, Waiwalam, Basham, Yahawashah, the water, Aman. English translation, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now. Right now, send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel, and send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins for the brothers and sisters in Israel, always and forever. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Four corners prayer. Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawa, Wayasha Allah, Wabath Yasaparim, Shemai, Yasharella, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. English translation. We said, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Prayer for the food. Yahweh, Gadawo, Basham, Madawanya, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Barak, Makau, Yanawa, Shatayawath, Yanawa, Yayan, Yanawa, Lacham, Yanawa, Shakava, Yanawa, Zakai, Shau, Hayarak, Kadash, Basham, Yahweh, the water, Amen. All right, and I usually do this before we do the closing prayers, but I'll just do it real brief. I'll just show it to you guys and just give you guys a cap before we close out. So I know normally tonight will be a class night, but it's a new moon tonight. So just remember, every Tuesday and Friday night from 7 to 10 p.m., you want to call this number, 667-770-1085, the conference code of 52455. The teleconference that we have for our Tuesday and Friday class. If you want to join us on Zoom, make sure you have Zoom installed on your device, be it a phone, tablet, laptop, desktop, or bigger. And you want to go to this website on your browser, which is profitabletalks.com, which is what you see right here. Profitable Talks, same way you see it spelled there, profitabletalks.com, during those same times that you saw a second ago. And you want to donate to what we're doing here, is this particular branch of Christ, for us doing the service, us going up to camp, us doing different holy days and things of that nature. You can donate by check or money order to this address. And the name that you see there, Ha Yashar Kanas, 3826B, Germantown Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19140. And you want to donate by electronic means, if you didn't want to do a check or money order, you can send it here, paypal.me/HYK12 or paypal.me/HYK12, or Zelle us at 646-620-7378. And as always, like and share the video so we can spread this word and get more of Israel warned, so that more and more brothers of Christ can rise up and come back to the knowledge of this truth. Because remember, we may still waiting on Christ, but Christ is waiting on us. Remember Luke 24, Matthew 24, and I'll read it real quick. Here's the verse I always like to go to remind us that Christ is waiting on us. Until we do our part, then the Most High can send Christ down, whenever that day might be. But we know a prerequisite for Christ making the second coming is if we do our part. So this is Matthew 24, and I'm going to read verse 14, where it says, "In this gospel, the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come." Okay, so remember that, Israel, and enjoy the feast. So Shark, that once again, the water for allowing us to share those that final housekeeping with you. Have a blessed new moon. Most of us will talk to you about it in the Friday class. So Shark, that once again, wa laila tuwa.